Hello, everyone. Today we will be discussing a vital topic, probably pleasant to some of us and distasteful to many of us. It's the separation process. We will talk in details how exactly the separation of an employee from the organization has to be dealt with. So, what are the reasons for separation? One of the major reasons are resignation. One of the very major reasons are resignation. People are venturing into greener pastures in the hope to find better life, and they leave their existing organization. Now, what happens whether they actually uh, have a wonderful life or not is a very big question that needs to be answered or probed upon. But resignation plays the majority of the roles as far as the separation thing goes around it. Next major reasons are termination. Now, termination when a person is not been able to live up to the expectation, one, or live up to the promise that he or she has given to the organization, probably primarily for these two reasons he there has been a separation of the relationship from the organization end, and that is what we call as termination. Definitely then comes the discharge. The discharge is on, you are doing good in the duties, you are doing wonderfully well, and as far as the productivity is concerned nobody is giving a question mark, but awfully more often than not you indulge yourself with certain antisocial activities. As a result, your continuity of the employment is put into question, and that is the reason why at times the organization opt for a separation from its own end towards the employee. Next would be dismissed. Now, dismissed is somewhere down the corner. What we have is because of an awful behavior that you come across. The major reason of dismissal in an organization around the globe is insubordination. When you don't listen to your superordinate boss or your bosses or your peers as such, when you misbehave with them, there's no question of being getting into antisocial elements or illegal activities. It is just a behavior that is a pain point altogether. Then comes something called retrenchment. Now, retrenchment is a process wherein a company is doing wonderfully well but suddenly find itself into a sticky position. Now, being into the sticky position, either the product that the company is into gets vanished and the taste of the clientele or the customer changes, so company is forced to curtail its operation. As a result, it is not making enough money to be paid to all the employees of what is it been hired for. So in that case, the company goes for a retrenchment of employees or workforces altogether. Remember, this is neither the fault of the company, probably, but definitely not the fault of an employees. So this is what the retrenchment is all about. It out comes the wonderful experience call of separation called retirement, where after a lifelong employment with an organization of, let's say, 25, 30, 35, 40, or even 45 years, people retire because they are not been able to perform their duties physically due to old age, and this is a term which is known as retirement. This is an amicable separation between the employer and the. We'll talk about each of the process in detail as much as possible. Resignation, there are basically the five processes that needs to be catered around it. First is the resignation letter which the employee has to write stating his intention that he or she is not willing to continue with the organization. So it will come to HR through the line manager. So you write to your bosses, the boss will pass the information to the HR fellow with the recommended release date. Probably, why do we have a recommended release date? Let's say you have a contract, one, So at the end of the contract period, you can finish it off. Or let's say there is a process that the company is undergoing. There is a huge order backlog, and the company is in the process of getting rid of those backlog orders. So as long as the backlog orders are pending, you probably your employer might ask, why not hang around and deliver this thing on our behalf? So maintaining a cordial relationship, we come and decide upon a mutually applicable and amicable release date. Then comes the authority's consent. The authority's consent to proceed is very important, where it tells it to you uh, whether the authority has actually ceded to your request of resignation. If not, the HR will forward. If not, this has to be reconsidered. Probably there is a hike in the pay. Probably there's a hike in the job role as such. It depends. So HR will forward the resignation letter to the authority for his or her instruction. Acceptance letter to employee. The moment your resignation has been accepted, there has to be a proper communication from the HR confirming the employee about the nod that he or she has requested for and the tentative release date, so that he and the company, the employee and the company, can adjust to any outstanding liabilities if there is. Comes the liability position circular from human resource in a prescribed format to all concerned with an email stating that this particular employee with a particular ID is undergoing a separation process. So anything which is there in his jurisdiction which belongs to the company should be taken back. So feedback has to reach the HR within a stipulated date. For example, many companies issue laptops to an employee. The laptop needs to be given back. Many companies, many of an employees take salary advances for few things, or perhaps loan also. So these needs to be accrued upon. These needs to be notified. If there are books, if there are tickets which have they have tickets to different places, destination places on behalf of the company that the people have visited, have been have entrusted or enjoyed the services of certain vendors on behalf of the company for the work of the company, all legalities needs to be filled in. Final settlement calculation in a prescribed format. Employee entitlement as per policy is to be done. What is his or her entitlement? What are the receivables? Please understand, your entitled might be X amount, but your receivable might be delta X amount, a minuscule part of X amount. Why? Because you might have taken a loan or salary advance and so on and so forth. So employee entitlement and employee receivables are two different things. And then there are employee liabilities, which is the employee has to give back to the company. I said the laptop is the one, probably the car or the house accommodation which has been extended. It has to be given up. Resignation, the communication to the employee, liability is higher than receivables. Where you have a higher liability, let's say I have an X amount is my liability and delta X my receivable. So it's a smaller, minuscule is some money. I might have, let's say, $5 as a liability, and my receivable is only $1. So that means I have to give $4 back. So formal communication to employee asking to settle down his or her liability is a must. Approval for release order. This is to be done. Formal office note recommended by head of the human resource or the authorities needs to be followed it up. And then comes the release letter. Once everything, all the financial transaction, all the non-monetary transaction has been settled down, the release letter is to be taken forward. So this needs to be taken into consideration and then issued by the authority. Exit interview to be conducted by the HR, definitely within the approved format. And once the exit has taken place, the final settlement, namely the payment receivables, has to be intimated to the finance to process that disbursement ASAP, as soon as possible. File thereafter, once the employee leaves the organization, the file is closed thereafter. Post resignation, there's another process of termination as a separation process. So what do we have? We will talk about the proposed process very minutely. Authorities concerns to proceed. Now, this is what is required. It is the initiation does not come from the employee. This time, the initiation comes from the employer. Authorities approval to terminate the concerned employee officials. The termination letters to be to the employee. So what has happened? Now the authority has already decided, and the letter has to be intimated, or the employee has to be intimated that his or her service is no longer required. Now, who does it? It is done through the HR, issued to the employee by the HR for settling down all his or her liabilities. So, liability position circulars is being issued. Now, this time from HR in a prescribed point, either a mail or a form has been circulated to all the concerned department, stating the separation process of a stated individual. Now, this, if any department comes to know about any liability, anything outstanding in terms of finance, any asset that goes around it, any vendor management or liabilities are there, this needs to be notified. Final settlement calculation in a prescribed format, the employee's entitlement as per policy. Yes, definitely. If there is a termination, probably there is a notice period, or there is a ex gratia payment that has been given to it. Then the receivables, what is the entitlement and what is the receivables? As earlier notified or discussed here, the X amount and the delta X amount might vary. At times, the delta X is usually lesser than the X amount. So at times, entitlement is more and receivable is less. At times, receivable is more and entitlement is less. Depend upon these liabilities, the employee will get back to point number 5 again. So communication to the employee, liability is higher than the receivable. So if the employee has to give something to the employer rather than the other way around, formal communication to employee asking to settle down the liabilities, the outstanding liabilities that he perhaps she owns. For approval for final payment, liability is either less or zero. So formal note has to be recommended by the head office or the authority altogether. That needs to be done. Final settlement payment, which is to be done, has been to be intimated to the finance department to process the disbursement, to process the money that needs to be given out. And thereafter, we close the file for the employee. Next comes the retirement. Wow. Now, retirement is a process where the list is a process altogether, collects from information system of every month, management information system. It is everybody knows what is the when a gentleman or a lady has joined the organization, for how long he or she has been working around it, what is his or her age, and what is the prescribed age by the legal law of the land, or perhaps the rules and regulation of the company. As per it, the list of retirement has been prepared by the HR department. Authorities consents proceeds to needs to be proceeded. Once the authority approval comes in, the nod has been there. We start with the process of notifying the employee, from the HR to the retiring employee, confirming his date of retirement and probably asking him or her to settle down all the pending dues. Circular for liability position for resigned employee from HR in prescribed format to all the concerned points through email. Feedback should reach HR within the stipulated period. Remember that the tentative retirement date is already been announced. Final settlement, as has been discussed earlier, remains more or less this: the employee's entitlement, the employee's receivables, and the employee's liability. So whatever the entitlement is as per the policy, whatever the employee is supposed to receive, if there are any, and then what are the liabilities that the employee needs to give it back to the employer. So minus this, you will get your final settlement calculation. Communication to an employee is to be done formally, asking him or her to settle the dues altogether. We continue with the process of retirement, final approval for settling of the dues, the final payment, formal office note recommended by head of the HR department, followed by the authority's approval. That has to be done. Now, once you have done with this thing, comes the most important fact is your experience certificate is to be issued by the authority, duly signed and stamped by the authority about the wonderful service which was been imparted by the so-called retired employee. Exit interviews again to be conducted within the prescribed format, approved by the HR and done by the HR. Final settlement payment, intimation of the finance to process the disbursement has to be done then and there. File out thereafter needs. We come to the process of discharge. Now, why this thing comes around it? Let us understand. Let us have a sympathetic viewpoint. Let's say there's a medical issue which comes up, collected from the practicing medical registered medical practitioner, or for a or for anybody recommending diagnostic centers, anything. Now, what happens is we need to look into it. The authority needs to proceed with the consents. Once this has been approved, now you have been discharged because you are probably not physically fit to continue with the job due to certain of the ailments that has incurred upon you. The discharge letter to employee, this has to be communicated, issued by the HR with instruction to adjust his liability. Remember, liabilities settlement or the final settlement remain the same status for everybody. So, liability position circular, which again has to be issued by the HR to various departments in whichever the employee, the so-called discharged employee, to be discharged employee, communicates or interacts with, and every departmental feedback will be taken within a stipulated period. Final settlement calculation is nothing but again employees entitlement plus employee receivable minus the employees liability. We need then to go and communicate the employee, formal communication to the employee asking to settle down his or her liabilities, approval for final payment if the liability is nil or less, formal office note recommended by the head office of HR, and the authorities is must approval once stamped, done and delivered. Final settlement can be initiated by the finance department. Their finance will hence disburse everything that is being pending towards the employee and thereafter close the file. Talking about clearance form, final settlement and calculation sheet. At the fag end of the presentation, I would love to give you a brief sample about the thing. Remember, it's just not sacrosanct. Every organization have their own final settlement dues, own clearance form. Now, what is the termination of a contract? When permanent members cannot be terminated unless, let's say, a proper documented reason. Perhaps there are certain illegalities that he or she might have incurred. There is a proper show cause notice that has been there. There is a full discriminatory policies, or let's say there is a committee which has been formed and the committee has recommended a proper prior month notice, 30 days notice for a normal employee, 90 days notice for senior employees has to be given. The wages has to be paid for. Any misconduct by the employee are the reason to go for. Now, why 1 month salary for normal employees, middle to lower level employees would be a month salary has to be calculated. This is the worker's choice of leaving the organization with advance 1 month notice. So if I want to resign, I might give 1 month notice or 1 month salary. So depends upon it. But in cases of senior employees, it is usually 3 month salary kind of scenario. So mind you, non-permanent staff or contractual staff or person who are not regular on the payroll have no such entitlement. This needs to be kept in your. Aggrieved employee may proceed with the labor codes. If you think any injustice has been meted, please you are welcome to visit the labor code. Now, based upon this, you will take all the activities and the court will decide in somebody's favor or not. So that needs to be taken for. Then bring the grievances into superior attention in writing within 3 months of occurrences. Please, this is very vital. You should not let the issue die down on a national case. Beyond 3 months, the case just fizzle out. If there is any injustice, if you feel there is something gone wrong with you, please look into it. Retrenchment, dismiss, and discharge. You have been you have been basically removed if your productivity is not good enough. You are probably dismissed. Probably if you are looking into certain immoral activities, or should I say immoral behaviors, you are discharged. Probably there is something illegal that comes around it, or you are medically unfit. Retrenched, probably the company does not have the viability of maintaining you or giving you the salary. That is the reason why we go for retrenchment. Labor court has powers to intervene, examine the corrective measures against any colorful exercise. The labor court has power for against victimization, against unfair labor practices, any violation of natural principles of justice, and definitely any unjust action. The labor court will always take into consideration everything before part 1. This is how exactly the form looks around it. This is exactly a long form. Because of this, in the PowerPoint presentation mode, I had to bifurcate this form into two parts. So this is full and final settlement, just a glimpse, just for your understanding. Now we'll come to clearance form. Again, let me give a disclaimer that this is not sacrosanct. Things might change from organization to organization. More or less, we have the organization details on the top, which I have obligated. Then the employee name. We have the employee ID, any code for the employees, position code, position title, the status, whether he's been resigned or transferred or been terminated. We have the effective separation date. Now we have employees from different companies. We have the procurement card, the preparatory accountability card, anything that needs to be there, any leave that has been issued, any things that needs to be given by the employee has to be signed, and from the same functional head a signature has to be obtained. So employee signatures, mailing address. The financial obligation is a special place altogether. The financial obligation will tell if everything has been satisfied or not based upon the signatures out here. And last but not the least would be your administrative approval, which means your authority's approval has to be there, which has to be your supervisor, supervisors, administrator, payroll, and records. And with this, we come to the end of the presentation. Thank you for watching. Hope I have clarified all your doubts. Thank you.